So, what are the consequences for the nations? There is a globalization of nations. There are economic consequences, of course, and this is very clear and very obvious and very dramatic in the case of Latin America. And of course, the weakest, the nation, the poorer the nation, of course, the more exposed it is to these global movements and global imposition of capitalism. The economic consequences can be summarized into this. There is a dismantling of local industries. There is a destruction of the local industries. There is a denationalization of state enterprises because there is a privatization, but this privatization means, by definition, the denationalization, because all these privatizations are done, all these enterprises are bought or are taken over by transnational corporations, by transnational capital. There is a dollarization of national economies, in some cases, like in Ecuador. This reaches the point when the country, the government itself, decides to declare the dollar the official currency. But in fact, in every single economy, people have to live with the parameter of the dollar, which means that actually the expense of life for regular people, for working people, becomes much, much more expensive. There is unemployment, underemployment, and job insecurity because of this dismantling of local industries and the nationalization, so on and so forth. And there is also the spread of the informal economies. The informal economies is one of the most important phenomena in Latin America in the last decades, because actually the informal economies in many countries amount to 50%, sometimes even more than 50% of the total national economy, of the PBI of countries. The consequences are multiple, and I cannot summarize them here. There are political consequences, and the main political consequence is the transfer of national sovereignty. Countries will maintain a limited sovereignty. Countries, governments, and of course their people will maintain a very limited sovereignty, because most of the decision making will not be done by governments and elected officials, but by administrators, by bureaucrats, and people who work or had to negotiate with the bureaucrats of the main financial institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, and so on and so forth. There are social consequences. And the most important is the increase in equality. And let me read this quote by Manuel Castells again. Articulation of the global elites, segmentation and disorganization of the masses seem to be the twin mechanism of social domination. In short, elites are cosmopolitan, people are local. The space of power and wealth is projected throughout the world, while people's life and experience is rooted in places, in their culture, in their history. Thus, the more a social organization is based upon ahistorical flows, the more the logic of global power escapes the social-political control of historically specific local and national societies. Yes, there is increase in inequality, and this is very, very clear in the case of Latin America, although we don't have to go far. This is also happening in the U.S. The U.S. is becoming more and more and more unequal society every day, and has been so. The decline and the widening gap between the rich and the majority of the people is making the middle class disappear. We all know that. We experience that, but also is producing a more stratified, a more unequal society as has ever seen before. So there you have some numbers about the inequality in Latin America, but it's I want to just remember that the richest 1/10% of the population in Latin America and the Caribbean earn 48%, almost half of the total income of these societies, while the poorest 10% only earn 1.6%. So, social consequences, migration of the diasporas, of course. And there you have some figures, nearly 30 million Latin American migrants, 14% in other Latin American countries, because we have to remember also that there is a lot of internal migration in Latin America, huge internal migration in Latin America, to Argentina, to Mexico, to Venezuela, to different countries, from their regional flows. The facts like Mexico has the highest number of migrants worldwide, is the highest producer of migrants in the world. Or like the Mexico-U.S. border is the vastest and most active migration corridor in the world. There are cultural consequences. And the cultural consequences also had to do with the development of a transnational pop culture and a global-centric imaginary that had come to substitute, to replace the old Eurocentric imaginary. Eurocentrism is not in vogue anymore, and it's actually criticized very much. But it has been replaced by a global-centric imaginary that actually is very much works in tandem with the big corporations, the big media producers, and so on and so forth. There are socio-cultural consequences that are very, very deep and very devastating. And are called by the Chilean sociologist Martin Hoppenheim disintegrative integration, because everybody is integrated to globalization. Everybody everywhere is connected and integrated to globalization one way or another. But what happens in the poor countries, in Latin American countries, is that there is a systematic unevenness between the ideological integration to global offers, global desires, and global products and global ideals, and the regressive pace of socio-economic integration that actually will make possible, the actual integration of these people as global consumers. So you can see that, and of course, this fits many, many different problems, including urban violence. Some people will kill just for a pair of Nikes or a pair of shoes or whatever, just because there are so much desire, and we are told to desire those products. We are told, we are taught that is cool, is good, is becoming modern and cosmopolitan and global to have the pair of shoes that some people is actually eager to kill for that pair of shoes. So, while the elites experience globalization in Latin America, I'm talking about, while the elites, and we're talking here 15%, 20% of the population, experience globalization as a provisional condition, and they enjoy it as a provisional condition, which presupposes a diversified and sophisticated consumption, access to information and technology, travels, and the joyful abandonment to the seductions of an unpredictable and vertiginous life. The masses, the working masses, live globalization as a precarious condition, characterized by labor insecurity, social violence, and an uncertain future. And this is actually beginning to erode some of the most successful cases of economic neoliberal policies, like in Chile, for instance. So, we can talk about nations as globalized nations. Transnational flows of capital, information, goods, and people operate through and often in spite of nation states, transgress their laws and borders, and impose treaties and policies that dismantle state institutions, replace national imaginaries, and transfer sovereignty. The globalization of the nation-state is a structural, constitutive, and constituent element of the global regime. And this is, I don't know how much, but to emphasize this point. I mean, this is a structural element. In other words, the modern nation-state is adapted to the new global order, turned into an indispensable administrator of populations and a gear for global governance.